Welcome back to Vantage. The next manager I have on the show made headlines a couple of years ago by taking the entrepreneurial leap. He's a man who's got a fantastic track record, a great history of stock picking. Delighted to have him on the show. We're going to learn a little bit more about where he is today and how he's managing money. Let's go and take a look. Welcome back to Vantage. I am delighted to have Alexander Darwall here with us. He's got a fantastic track record. He's taken on a new venture over the last couple of years, and now here as the CIO of Devon Equity Management. Someone I know that's got quite a lot of strong conviction in his ideas, and that's what I really wanted to get him onto the show for. Welcome.
Thank you, Neil.
I said that you're a high conviction manager. Just to illustrate that, I know that you've got some relatively sort of firm views on inflation. We've had managers coming on here debating whether it's transitory or not, and I'd love to get your views on that. And also, the last couple of years we've seen ESG really coming to the fore, and I'd be interested in your views on that.
Thank you. Well, when people talk about me as a conviction manager, what they normally mean is I identify great companies and I stick with them and I'm absolutely convinced by them and run a 28 stock portfolio. So that's really where I put all my attention, is because we invest in companies. I don't invest in economies, I invest in companies. So we're going to make money for you, the investors, by making good company decisions. So that's really where I put all the focus and my conviction. But that said, turning to the couple of points you raised, one on inflation and ESG. On inflation, well, I haven't built the portfolio on whether we're right or wrong about whether inflation is going to be transitory or more permanent. However, for what it's worth, and it's not worth a lot, I think it's going to be a more permanent problem for various reasons. One is the European economies, and America for now, though America I think in due course will change, have hidebound their economies by more and more supply-side restrictions, which are in and of themselves inflationary. The energy transition is necessarily and always will be at higher cost. I think it's complete fantasy, and the great fantasist Boris will tell you otherwise. But there's very good, the physics of it is that typically the green solution is more expensive. Now you might think it's worth paying, you might not, but I think it is undoubtedly the case that this is going to lead to higher energy costs, and we're seeing that reflected now. So we don't change the portfolio whether I'm right or wrong on these things. We try and duck some of those issues by having companies which are not hurt by, say, energy inflation. So we don't have a lot of metal bashers, which are very energy intensive, transforming processing industries. We have more IP, intellectual property, which is prone to less inflation, I would say, certainly on less energy inflation than the metal basher types would be. So I think we're sort of reasonably well positioned for energy inflation, but I think the energy transition is necessarily inflationary. So I have greater concerns there. And I think, of course, the central banks, which are now highly political, don't have the will, certainly not in Europe, to deal with inflation. I mean, the governor, the Bank of England, is a very good case in point. Inflation is no longer his sole and core remit. He's lost interest in that, and he's interested in a whole bunch of other things which are a lot more exciting and woolly and fluffy for him to deal with. So he can opine on a whole series of things, and he can promote a regulatory agenda without having the bother of making difficult decisions about dealing with inflation. So they will deal with inflation, but it will be, I think, probably too late. But if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter in a sense, because I'm a conviction investor about finding great companies and sticking with them. And a great company should be able, a special company should be able to deal with transitory inflation or more structural inflation, and competes and succeeds on the world stage, so we can get around that. Just turning briefly to ESG. To have a successful investment, to have a company that produces products and services that people want to buy over the long term, and to do that profitably and successfully, you need to get those elements of ESG right, and that's always been the case. So I don't quite understand what ESG is doing, if not doing what we've always done, which is paying attention to the quality of our companies, the quality of the products and services, the quality of the way they treat people. If you don't do that, you don't have a profitable business. But we are interested in sustainably profitable businesses.
Okay, that's a good start. Now, you've got a long career history. Just to educate our viewers, maybe you can just quickly walk us through your journey into the fund management industry and the entrepreneurial leap and where you are today.
Oh, right. Well, gosh, I was, for 10 years, I was a sell-side analyst, based in London and in Paris. I worked for Goldman Sachs in London and in Paris, as I'm a French speaker. I worked at that time for De Zoet & Bevan, BZW. Mm-hmm. So engaging with companies is what I'd always done as a sell-side analyst. And then after 10 years on the sell side, I moved into fund management at Jupiter, where I remained. And the reason I left Jupiter just over 2 years ago was, much as I like my old colleagues and only have good things to say about them, I felt uncomfortable really with the mainstream fund managers, just as a generic, are constantly pushing to become, I think, more similar to each other. And I think they run the risk of losing sight of what we're here to do, which is try and make money for customers. That's our job, is to make money. And some organisations feel a bit uncomfortable using words like money. They feel more comfortable signalling sort of greater virtue and talking about a whole bunch of other things. And I'm unashamed, we try to make money for our customers. That's what we're here to do. That's what the investment business is. And if we lose sight of that core purpose, I think it makes it very difficult and it gets very complicated when you're running a bunch of other agendas. So it's really a comment on the mainstream. I prefer, I've got like-minded and excellent colleagues. We're here to try and do a good job for customers.
Yeah.
The focus is customers, but we mean it, others just say it.
So tell us a little bit more. Now you've been running a couple of years. Tell us a little bit more about Devon Equity and the funds you run and a little bit about the team.
Okay. We tried to bring with us all the things that have made our strategy successful for the previous 20 years. And to do that, I needed a couple of partners, excellent partners, our CEO, Richard Pavry, and Luca Emo, who's been working with me closely on research for about 15 years now. And we have a fourth partner who's made a massive difference to the quality of our investment process, Charlie Southern. So we are 4 partners, and we have a wider team around it. We have all the elements in place that we need. Excellent CEO, a better quality platform than I've ever had before. A platform, that's to say, whether it's for compliance or order management, and indeed especially for investment, which is wholly focused on one thing, which is trying to do a good job for customers.
Okay, and what's the investment philosophy? We touched on this, the high conviction, high quality companies, but run us through, what do you look for?
What we try and find is what I call a special company. And a special company, which is not growth or value, because we want both, we want growth at good value, is a special company is one that can flourish through the cycle over many years, has something special which competitors find very hard to imitate and regulators aren't really interested in knocking. And where we can find companies who do something special, a product or a service, and they can maintain a sustainable advantage there, that's to say a durable advantage, and they can price for it, they can monetize what they do, and customers are happy and owners are happy, that's a great place to be. And all our companies, we hope, fit into that category, into that description, that same pattern, that we think they are winners from technology. We think they're winners from changing consumer habits. We think they're winners from regulation. We want to be on the right side of history, and we do that by picking companies that do something differentiated and so where they can monetize that differentiation. And we don't play market rotations and fashions, and we don't play timing of the cycle. We find what we think and hope are great companies and special companies, and we stick with them.
Okay, so and the attributes typically you'd look for are things like pricing power, competitive advantage, niches where you can dominate.
Indeed. Though I'd add a couple of things to that. One is when we talk about niches, niche doesn't have to be small. You know, the niche could be big.
Yeah.
If you take, and I'll take as an example simply because it's our biggest holding, so you would expect us to have a high conviction, Novo Nordisk. It is, along with Eli Lilly of America, the two of them dominate the treatment of diabetes and indeed increasingly the treatment of obesity worldwide. You can say that diabetes and obesity are niche areas, but on a global basis, these are huge addressable markets. So yeah, sure, they're very, very good in those niches, but these are big global niches.
Yeah, okay, understood. So, as you're scouring the universe and you happen to identify something that's suddenly taken your interest, walk us through the process, effectively, your investment process, where you do the checks and balances, you get a little bit more comfort around the conviction.
We are organised typically with two of us looking at any one stock or sometimes more. So we have a good deal of the number side being done by one person on that particular pairing, and along with the pair of us looking at the fundamentals and the qualitative aspects. But we see competitors to this target company and suppliers and customers. We will bring in questions and thinking from a wide array of sources, as I say, customers and competitors, suppliers, and indeed using expert networks and our work in looking at many, many other companies, and we will test our thinking with the company concerned and test our thinking with their competitors and so forth. So we'll put a lot of effort into trying to understand the competitive landscape and whether this company truly has something special, and whether they can maintain that advantage, and indeed whether they can monetize that advantage. So a lot of work will go into it, but we work as one investment team. A pair of us might have a greater focus on that particular company, but all of us will feed into the thinking on it, and we'll build an investment case and we'll build a DCF model, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and I think, you cross-check it with the broker network or the analyst network, but I understand also you use your own specific industry experts for due diligence, things like that.
We do. We use a lot of expert networks. We use a lot, another form of it is we test what we think with companies that we meet all the time, because no one knows more about a particular area than a chief executive working in that particular area. That we might talk to his CFO, we might talk to his chief technology officer, we might talk to a number of people there, but experts in the industry are always a fantastic source of information and understanding.
Okay, and maybe give us one or two examples of things that you've recently added to the portfolio that illustrate that.
Perhaps it's not necessarily something we've added recently to the portfolio, but I want to take Novo Nordisk again because it is the biggest holding. So why not talk about it? We'll talk about some other big holdings as well, but I think that's a good way of approaching it. We're constantly learning more as they go on their journey. We understand more and we test more and more things. I'll give you just some examples. So our conviction on that one might be increasing because evidence of successful clinical trials, evidence of FDA approval for drugs, but also we have, certainly the younger members of the investment team, telling me what they can see on social media in America about their new GLP-1 drug addressing obesity problems. Not something I'm good at. Thank goodness I work with younger people who can tell me the kind of incredible traction that new drug has in America in social media. We will test with, for example, Dassault Systèmes in a completely different area. They have a business called Medidata, which helps with clinical trials. We can talk to them about what they're hearing about Novo Nordisk. So we can cross-check that. This is what I call total market coverage, where we can try and find connections and sort of flakes of information and insight by making connections between companies that seem on the face of it very, very far apart. As I'm saying, Novo Nordisk, a pharmaceutical company, Dassault Systèmes in the computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacture business, but have also got a medical data business, because ultimately some of the medicine, the pharmaceutical industry has similar characteristics to the engineering industry in the end.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I was looking at the performance of the European Opportunities Trust, and you could see that there's been a reasonable amount of volatility of late. Firstly, I just want to check what caused that volatility. Have you got any exposure to Russia, and were there any other contributing factors?
I don't feel that our fund's particularly volatile. I don't get that sense. I think if you look at the underlying, the assets, the companies in which we invest, they're not particularly volatile businesses.
No.
Again, I'll take Novo Nordisk as an example. The number of people who need to take insulin tomorrow are similar to the number of people today, but just slightly higher tomorrow. Unless people die, they'll keep taking it. It is a remarkably steady business day to day. And typically when you have steady businesses, as we typically do, you would expect slightly less volatile share prices. So typically, I think we have less volatility. Why they've been so volatile, I don't really know. I suspect all funds will have been affected in the way by the energy shock coming from Russia-Ukraine conflict. But as I say, we're not so exposed to, we're certainly not exposed directly to Russia. We are all indirectly exposed, and through the energy exposure, everyone is affected, but I think we are affected less than most people. So, but volatility actually is not a problem. Volatility is always an opportunity. And through an investment trust, where the structure of an investment trust means that people can't panic, we are able to take advantage of other people panicking in the market. If there's a lot of volatility and we want to buy some things, well, that's terrific. And if we want to sell some things, that's terrific. But the investment trust itself, I don't feel as a volatile thing at all.
No. I mean, and I think that I guess the point is that the market is going. You're going to see fluctuations in the market, but you're buying into companies which have got clearly longevity in what they're doing, and you would expect to be able to ride that out. We talked a little bit about the energy transition sort of theme. Are there any other themes that you're looking to play, and any stocks that you're using to do that?
I think every company has to have a really credible digital strategy, and we try and understand, who's got a credible digital strategy and where they're winners and losers from. We spend a lot of time on that, so digital is certainly one. We also play a theme, if you like, of globalization. Now, in many ways, globalization is going to go backwards. There could be some onshoring, there are going to be sanctions here, there and everywhere, and not simply COVID, but also the energy shock, I think, has ramifications. Notwithstanding that, I think we've got a bunch of companies, and we need to test it continually, but I think we will continue to want to have companies that will compete and succeed on the world stage. It'll affect different, whether it's globalization or rowing back from globalization, the dislocation, it'll affect different people in different ways. So I think if we, again, I won't apologise, but I'll take Novo Nordisk again as an example. I don't see that obviously as being vulnerable to protectionism and dislocation, partly because I think internationally it's understood where it comes to pharmaceuticals, sanctions generally don't apply. But take markets like China, they will take the best drug available, and if you have something better than anyone else has got, they will take it, and indeed they'll pay properly for it. So I don't see that as being a particularly vulnerable thing. Though you could easily imagine where there are other areas more manufacturing based where people would be more vulnerable. So we look on a case by case basis, and it comes back to what I said right at the start. When it comes to conviction, for me, it's all about conviction about particular companies and understanding particular companies rather than just broad brush macro themes. So we'll look in very specific ways. But in answer to your question, globalization is certainly a theme we've pursued. We continue to pursue it, but we tread very carefully.
Okay. So, I mean, I myself, having taken the entrepreneurial leap, understand both the rewards and the challenges of doing so. I mean, how do you convince people? You know, I guess if you look at managers who've stepped out and set up independently, it's a sort of checkered record out there. How do you convince people that you are more akin to a Buffett or a Nick Train rather than a Woodford? What gives you conviction that you're doing the right thing?
Well, I certainly don't try and convince them in no terms. Before we set up, I was absolutely clear that I couldn't run the business, and I don't run the business. Richard Pavery, who I've worked with for, I think, and Richard will correct me, I'm sure, very quickly when he sees this, I think getting on, call it 20 years.
Yeah.
I know him well. He's exceptionally smart guy. He does all that for me. This is wonderful. I do investment with my colleagues. And the test of it is, the ultimate test is, do we produce good returns, make money for our customers? If we do, we're getting it right. If we don't, something's gone wrong. So if we get it right, I can only get it right if I have smart, motivated colleagues who want to work with me. And I think, unless I go back to the office and find things have changed, I think that's still the case. But if they're not happy, it comes back to ESG. If they don't want to work with me, no one's obliged to. So the test is, I can't produce good returns for investors unless I've got good quality colleagues, and I can only have good quality colleagues if they want to work with me.
Okay, and so let me sort of summarise that as you've created a platform to allow you the freedom to seek out the kind of companies that you've always liked. Companies which have strong moats, have good pricing powers, are defensible, are going to ride the test of time, etc. So when the going gets tough, you should be all right. You're now have a team of people that allows you to effectively focus on the business. It's going to be fascinating to watch, and I wish you every success in terms of scaling the business. Thank you very much for coming on Vantage.
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure.
Excellent.